Hey, I'm Kevin O'Connor.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Tjarks.
I'm J. Kyle Mann, and these are the 10 biggest questions going into the NBA draft.
How many trades will there be and who might want to trade up?
If you talk to people in the NBA and you say, if you're the top pick, what would you do? To a man, they all say, well, I would trade down. It's like the hip answer, but to trade down means someone has to trade up. And who's trading up in a draft where the top players have so many question marks? It have to be one of these lower tier Eastern Conference teams that wants a big time playmaker or potential star. So Charlotte at 3, Chicago at 4, Detroit at 7, New York at 8.
Charlotte, I've heard that they love Wiseman, that they love Onyeka Okongwu, a center from USC. But even beyond that, though, would there be a team like the Knicks that might want to move up? Or maybe a team like the Wizards who like Okongwu? Would they want to trade up for LaMelo, have him behind Wall and Beal? Or would they want to trade up and get Okongwu if the Hornets don't take him at 3? There's so many variables with the lottery.
The problem is, for all those teams, I guess with the exception of Chicago, they're all going to be bad next year. And everyone in the AAU circle says next year's draft is much, much better in terms of high-quality talent. So is anybody really going to give up an unprotected pick in next year's draft to move up for a guy in this year's draft?
It's weird with this year's draft because we've had 5 additional months with it being delayed from June all the way until November, that there's still no consensus on anybody from the top of the draft with the guys like Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball to the back end of the first round with the Desmond Baines of the world. Nobody agrees on these players, and that lack of consensus for us, it's going to make it so fun and unpredictable on draft night.
Who is most likely to contribute to a championship team? I think there are plenty of those guys in this draft. And this is what makes this draft so interesting is that, good organizations are going to have to thread the needle in the middle. So I think you've got guys like Tyrese Halliburton, who can give you two-way intelligence, really smart team defender, really, really intelligent playmaker. And then you've got guys like Desmond Bain, can hit threes, can move the ball.
Desmond Bain from TCU, easily the number one guy who comes to mind that's going to be able to come in and contribute to a championship team. He's a smart player, sort of a Malcolm Brogdon style player in terms of just how reliable he is. Brogdon might not be a star, but he's somebody who can hit shots for you. He can do some stuff off the dribble. He's good on defense, and Desmond Bain has all of those qualities as well.
Then you got Josh Green, you've got Vassell, you've got Okoro. Those are all guys that I think could contribute to defensively flexible teams. And then there's late rotation guys like Grant Riller, Malachi Flynn, Devin Dotson, Cassius Winston, on down the line. So those are all players that I could see in the right situation contributing to that type of a team.
Which projected lottery picks have the highest chance of failing? LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball, LaMelo Ball. It is unfortunate to say that, but it's the reality. With LaMelo Ball, you have a guy who is a wizard as a playmaker. His skill is ridiculous as a passer, but everywhere else, there's question marks. LaMelo, much like his brother, is somebody who enters the league with one clear skill with his passing ability. But even Lonzo entered the league as somebody who at least really played hard on defense. And LaMelo doesn't have that. And that's something that teams are concerned about when it comes to the character and the personality aspect. So if teams want to take a swing, they can hit a grand slam with him, but there's also a chance that you whiff and that you regret not taking a guy who has a greater likelihood of being a solid player.
Does it make sense to take bigger gambles in a year where there are no sure things? And that's the question for a lot of these teams in the lottery, right? If everyone is saying there's not a great player here, there's no one we know for sure is going to be a good player, then the flip side of that is there's less risk to take a high upside pick higher in the lottery, right? If what you're giving up is only like an average NBA player at 5, 6, 7, or 8, then why not swing for the fences? That's someone like Alexis Pokusevski. He's a 7-foot, 200-pound guard from Greece that no one really has a great feel for his game, but the talent is clearly there when you're that tall and you can shoot that well and you're pretty athletic.
Pokusevski has skill. He can pass like a guard. He can shoot off the catch, off of screens, off the dribble.
I think that there's no question that Pokusevski is the most volatile proposition in this draft. He could go anywhere from absolute total bust and he's back home in a couple years to this guy could be playing next to another star in a couple years.
The problem is the downside. But if there is no downside, if there's no guys who make sense ahead of him, then why not take a chance, maybe a 10% chance at a star over a surefire role player?
He's somebody who, when we do redrafts years from now, it's like, how did Pokusevski go 25 or 20? To me, he's a gamble because he could bust with that type of body and those question marks, but the upside is pretty significant.
Which gamble in this draft could pay off the biggest? One of my favorite recently has been to look at a guy like Jaden McDaniels, a guy who came out of high school with a high RSCI rating, which is just our way of kind of composite saying which high schoolers are the most talented. And Washington was a team that traditionally plays zone, but in man possessions, he actually only allowed 0.628, which is incredibly low in half-court possessions in man-to-man. He's a guy that has really, really great defensive tools. When you get into kind of chaotic late rotation possessions, you want guys that can cover gaps quickly and also, provide some ball pressure, funnel guys where you want them to go. McDaniels is somebody that can do that, really akin to an OG Anunoby. He sort of is in that body type. I could see some Andrew Wiggins in there. He's not quite as solid a build as Wiggins, but he also is somebody that just has that lankiness that you like, that bendy, can mirror ball handlers. And I could see him in a team with great culture that can develop, character and things like that. I could see him paying off big. If he ended up on a team like the Raptors, if he slipped into the late, first round, he's the type of guy with the type of talent that could really pan out in that sense. And another gamble that I think could work out would be Precious Achiuwa in a limited role. I think that if you put up the right types of guardrails for what you want from him, Precious Achiuwa is a guy with physical tools that could fly around. KOC compared him to Montrezl Harrell, and I agree with that. He's the type of guy that could give you that rim protection, and eventually I could see him making open threes.
How many Cameron Johnson-style first-round surprises do we get? I would expect that we're going to get a lot of shocking picks in this year's draft because there's no consensus. I don't want to hear about a consensus in the 2020 NBA draft. Whether it's the top guys like LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards and James Wiseman, nobody agrees on them, but nobody also agrees with somebody like a Tyrese Maxey from Kentucky. Some teams that I talked to have him ranked top 10. They definitely have him as a lottery pick. Some people have him in the back end of the first round, so he could go anywhere. Somebody like Leandro Balmaro, who played last year in Barcelona, 6'7" point guard. He's another guy. I love him or hate him. Prospect. Would he go lottery? Probably not. But should we be shocked if Balmaro goes lottery? Not really. All it takes is one team to fall in love with a prospect. And this year, we might see what the Suns did last year with Cameron Johnson. They took him with the 11th pick. A lot of people thought he might go late first round or even second, but they liked him and they took their guy. Sometimes it works out. He had a good rookie year. Sometimes it doesn't, like when the Kings took Papagiannis in the late lottery. But hey, you got to take the guys you like, and we're going to see some of that this year.
Are upperclassmen undervalued in this draft?
I think upperclassmen are always undervalued because it's typically the upperclassmen who come in right away and they contribute, whether they go second round or whether they go undrafted.
This is such a weird year where you're going to be drafted by an NBA team and possibly in training camp 1 week later. There's not going to be summer league. There's no time for development. The G League might not even happen next year, and if it does, it's in a very limited setting. So as you get later in the first round, the value of a guy that does need development might grow because if he has to develop, he might be waiting a year to develop. Like he just might not be able to develop this season at all. And at that point, you're already falling behind next year's rookies.
This year, one of the guys who comes to mind is Killian Tilly, a big from Gonzaga. And with him, the concern isn't necessarily age, it's injuries. Put all that aside. Tilly has the shooting ability, the defensive versatility, the size as like near 7-footer. Why would you not want a guy like that when that's what you look for with bigs in today's league? And guys like them, they might not have the highest upside that they can crack into sometime down the line, but they are able to come in right away and maybe make a contribution to the team.
A guy like Malachi Flynn at San Diego State, you know for sure you can plug him in right away as a backup point guard. He's a good defensive player. He's a smart offensive player. That kind of 3-and-D skill set might make more sense in a draft where you just don't know how much time these guys will get to develop as opposed to a normal season.
Will bigs get selected higher as a reaction to the Lakers winning it all? One thing that's interesting is as the draft approaches, we're seeing more and more hype about someone like Onyeka Okongwu, a center from USC, as a potential top 3 pick. I've heard he's connected to the Charlotte Hornets. I do think it is a reflection of the need for size and skill. And that is something that has never changed. It's always sort of been the misconception about small ball. Small ball wasn't about going small. It was about getting skill on the floor. And as bigs, when they're younger, are shooting and they're ball handling, we're going to see more guys with skill enter the league. Okongwu could be representative of that. James Wiseman certainly is representative of that. Somebody like Jalen Smith, who I really like a lot for the Pelicans in the late lottery. If they take him, it's not necessarily because the Lakers were big. It's because he is somebody who can shoot and he can make plays for you as a passer. And he happens to be big. So I don't think teams are going to overdraft a big just because the Lakers won it all. You could look the year prior and look at the Raptors with Gasol and Ibaka and Kawhi and OG Anunoby and all the length they had. It's not necessarily a reaction to anything as much as the Lakers and Raptors show what's important, and that's size and skill.
Are the Wolves and the Warriors thinking long-term or short-term? And that's really the question for both these teams at the top of the draft. Because, ideally, you could think both. You could draft a Luka Doncic or a Zion Williamson or a Ben Simmons, a surefire number 1 overall pick who'll be good right away and has room to grow down the road. But for Minnesota and Golden State in this year's draft, that's just not available. Then the question becomes, for Golden State in particular, this is a team that wants to contend for a championship. Do they want to draft an older, more experienced player who can help them immediately, but who may not have much long-term growth? Or do they think, okay, should we wait for a guy who'll be good in 2 or 3 years as Steph, Klay, and Draymond get older and can move us to the next generation of Golden State basketball? And that's really the question. Because there are players with high upside in this draft, they just might not be able to help you right away. And if you're Golden State, we will be willing to wait. And it's the same thing with Minnesota. This is a team that's made the playoffs once in 14 seasons. How patient can they be given that? Given that Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell are ready to win now, can they sell them on a long-term developmental player with so much pressure around this franchise?
Who were the second-round sleepers?
So every year in the second round, we get guys that come in and we act like we're surprised that they're able to play basketball. And that is a year after year maddening thing that happens. And this year, I think some of the guys that have maybe gone overlooked that could end up playing on even like a playoff team in a couple of years, just adults,
Devin Dotson, a Kansas sophomore guard, is the first guy who comes to mind for me. Dotson has what you look for as a spark plug scorer coming off the bench. He can shoot off the dribble for you. He can create for others. Athletic finisher around the rim, even though he's only 6'2". He's on the smaller side. And to me, whether he goes late first or he ends up falling to the second round, which is quite possible this year, Dotson feels like a guy who could come in and make an impact for a team as a 6-man.
Xavier Tillman is a guy that played for Michigan State who's been a really consistent, really efficient pick-and-roll player with Cassius Winston. He's a guy that I think could give minutes in rotation. Also, I think Isaiah Joe is another sort of flamethrower potential. His volume caused his efficiency to go a little bit down at Arkansas this past year. He went from like 8 to 10 attempts per game in college. And that's something that I think that he could do at the next level. Another guy is a Kentucky guy, Emmanuel Quickley. He's a guy in 2 years at Kentucky that really showed an adaptability, which is a quality that I look for. Just a fast learner, really quick. And I think that he showed that He's learning to draw fouls. His, shot mobility went up really, really well in his 2 years at Kentucky. Quickly, also a guy that has, good physical measurements. He's got a 6'10" wingspan. So high release point that's getting quicker. And he's a guy that I think is just smart and really a dog of a worker. I could see him playing on a good team in a couple of years.
My second round sleeper in this draft is Cassius Stanley at Duke. I think he's the first Duke player in a long time who's actually undervalued. He's a 6'6" athletic wing with a pretty decent jump shot. And really, that's all you really need to know. Like, this guy he broke Zion Williamson's record for vertical at Duke. And he's a pretty good shooter, right? So that alone right there is value in an NBA team. You can plug him in right away. He can shoot threes and he can just guard multiple positions. Like, if you're going for a guy in the second round, I love Cassius Stanley as kind of a plug and play guy. I could see him being like Gary Trent Jr. down the road, same kind of player out of Duke. But my real big sleeper in this draft, it's not for this draft. I say trade back for a 2038 first round pick. There's a young man named Jackson Tjarks. He's in the 98th percentile of height. His father's 6'4", his mother's 5'11", his granddad's 6'7". This guy's gonna be a tall one. We're going to coach him up. Big things are coming. Watch out for the next great stretch five.
Thank you so much for watching this video. For more NBA draft content, head over to theringer.com where you can read a whole bunch of stuff. And please be sure to check out the Ringer's 2020 NBA Draft Guide. You can find the link in the description below.